we're going to talk about a roadmap to activity notes download. And we're going to be placing a special emphasis on implementation priorities. My name is Jackie Sermola with Ivans, and I will be your moderator today. The format for this session will be similar to previous sessions, so if you've joined us before, this will be familiar to you. We will have a panel discussion followed by a Q&A session. I am pretty excited today to be able to introduce to you our panelists. This afternoon, joining me will be the Executive Director of Technology, the Executive Director of ACT, Agency Council on Technology, Jeff Yates. And also joining us this afternoon will be representatives from the 3 agency management system vendors that currently support the activity notes download. So joining us will be Nellie Massoni, Senior Product Manager of Connectivity from Vertafore. I'm also pleased to be able to introduce Dennis Zimmerman from NASA, who's the Senior Download Development Specialist. And from Applied Systems, Joshua Moore will be joining us, the Agent and Carrier Relations Manager. In just a moment, we will start by asking them some questions. But before we do that, I wanted to lay a little bit of groundwork. Ivans has spent a lot of time over the last several months defining use cases for the activity notes transaction. There is a lot of information that can be disseminated from companies to agencies using activity notes. And so we've defined some use cases that have helped to determine implementation priorities. And as we go through the panel discussion, I believe the responses will line up really well with the 4 main categories that you see here. These 4 main categories kind of put a little better handle on all the types of information: documents, deck pages, billing information, pending cancellations, for example, and then marketing and generic memos. So that being said, my first question, Jeff, is to you. And Jeff, thank you for being here today with us. We appreciate it. My question is, how does these 4 categories, how does this align with your research and with the document that ACT published called the Agency Preferences for Electronic Communications? What type of information are agents looking for that can be satisfied with activity notes?
Well, Jackie, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm real excited that of all the work Ivans is doing to promote activity notes, because we at ACT totally agree with you that it's a major new functionality that I think is going to bring great efficiency to agencies and carriers. And there's a lot of industry interest right now in implementing this technology. As you mentioned, we recently, back in April, our carrier communications work group, which basically was agents, carriers, vendors, and others, who basically looked at all the transactions that carriers are sending to agents, and they're been moving from mail and paper to electronic. And so what we did is we went through each of those transactions and came up with the agency preferences for how they should be delivered. And what was striking in the April update of the report, and this is all up on the ACT website, and you're welcome to share this with the group, is by transaction, how important activity notes was for those communications from the carrier to the agent where they relate to a specific policy or client. And so there's a chart that's provided that gives you transaction by transaction what those preferences are, and you'll see activity notes just dominates it as an opportunity for the future for the industry. And the priority areas track very well with the Ivans report you've done on activity notes, the overview. The priority messages that we came up with, the agents came up with in our group, were underwriting memos, status of new business and quotes, overdue payments, pending cancellations, and delivery of policy documents. And again, this was not, there were additional things where we would like to see activity notes used for, but those were kind of the priority areas. And then in addition, we have just published, we've had a very active policy delivery work group looking at electronic policy delivery of documents both to agents and clients. And again, that document is up on the ACT website as well. But the key thing there is that group recommends the use of activity notes as kind of the #1 recommendation for the delivery of electronic policies from the carrier to the agent. And it has lots of other things that it recommends, but that is that's a key thing there. And again, I think this tracks very well with the overview that you all have done. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that the whole industry is involved. ACT, AUGI, the carriers, the vendors. We're all involved with the real-time download campaign to promote the use of real-time and download in the industry because of the great efficiencies it brings. And that campaign has identified 2 key priorities for the coming year that we would like to see increased implementation. The first one is activity notes, and the second one is growth of commercial lines real-time rating. So again, I'm really happy doing the seminar. I'm really happy with the interest the carriers have in beginning implementation at the Accord Implementation Forum. There were several sessions on activity notes, and they were really well attended. So I'm really encouraged by that. And I know there's a lot of agents on the call too. Start thinking about activity notes and start implementing them where they're available from your companies, because I think this is a great technology to, again, increase the use of electronic, paperless agencies. Great efficiency booster that we hope we see incredible implementation in the coming year.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. So you had mentioned the document is available on the ACT website, correct? So if anybody
that is correct. Both the one is called the one that has the chart that goes through all the transactions is the Agency Preferences for Carrier Electronic Communications Report, and it's up there just on the front page of the ACT site. You can see it under Be Efficient, and then you'll see it there. And then you'll also see the one on policy delivery, which is best practices recommendations for delivery of insurance policies to agents and insurers, and that's up there too.
Wonderful, thank you. As my next question, I'd like to switch gears a little bit, and I'd like to start with you, Nellie, and I'd like to ask all of the vendor representatives the same question. But Nellie, if I can start with you, what type of activity notes transactions do you get the most questions about, or are agents requesting the most?
Oh, thanks so much, and thanks again for having us on here. Most of what we hear from our agents is that they want activity notes to automate what they're doing every day already. So what they're doing every day is going and checking on policy and claim related information, getting additional documentation, cancellations, like pending cancellations. And the most important thing that we hear is the actual documentation of deck pages, whether it's insured or agency copies. So that, I think, is particularly useful for the activities and notes transaction.
Yeah, and that sounds like it aligns really well with those 4 categories that we put up on the screen a couple of minutes ago, and also what Jeff just described to us as well. Dennis, I'd like to ask you the same question. As far as your NASA agents, what are you getting the most requests for in regard to activity notes transactions?
Well, thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be a part of this today. What we're finding is that the agencies are really they're learning about activity and notes, and so they want to know what can be sent. They're not entirely sure exactly all of the things that are available, and that at this point varies by the carrier and what the carrier has identified as priorities for them. So it really does vary. We see that a lot of agencies are really looking for the attachments, very much as Nellie has already said, to really automate that process that they're doing on a daily basis. They would like to have attachments directly placed right on the appropriate policy and have it track, have it create some kind of a trigger to allow their workflow to go smoother. And so whether it's underwriting or policy information or payment information, all of that, just what they're looking for, at least what we have seen to this point, is that they're looking to be able to try and get things to go smoothly and automate what they already are doing.
Thank you. And finally, Josh, I'd like to ask you about Applied Agent. Same question. What kinds of information are they looking for? I'm assuming that it's probably going to be very similar, which means we have a real opportunity to promote consistency in how and what information is being sent.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Great to be here with everyone today. Absolutely. I can, going last, I can kind of parrot Nellie and Dennis, so thanks, guys, for going first on this. Pending cancellation notifications, deck pages for new business endorsements and renewals, claim and loss related documents. Those are all the sort of things that, that Nellie mentioned. That's what we hear consistently from agencies. But to Dennis's point, we also hear from a lot of agents that they just want their existing workflows to be more automated. They want to reduce that manual work to procure attachments and store them in their system. And they really are curious and exploring this functionality about what's potential for this in the future. And I think once in a while I hear some discussion of the claim workflows, what can be done, or excuse me, the commercial lines workflows, what can be done to improve the process of managing commercial business.
Okay, thank you. And I want to stick with you guys from the management systems, but I'll start this time, Dennis, with you. And you touched on this a little bit in your previous answer. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about it. And my question is, what types of workflow improvements can agents achieve by accepting activity notes? Maybe some examples that you've experienced with some of your NASA agents.
Sure. One of the things that we looked at as we began to implement this into the Eclipse system was how can we get this information that's being downloaded and put it into a useful format and still create the necessary workflow events that would go along with it. So what we have implemented, at least to this point, is to have this download come in and process and attach. If there is a policy found or if there's a customer that the document or the information applies to, it automatically gets created into a reminder, an activity that then is in a queue for the agent or the CSR to be able to follow up on. If, for instance, it is a failure of a payment, then they can have that information right there without having to go and check a website or look at paper. They can actually get that information, go into whatever their agency has deemed to be the appropriate steps to take, whether it's payment or policy or the various things. All of that really comes through very easily and quickly when the download is processed, when that activity note is sent through from the carrier to that agency. The goal for us, and so far it seems like it's worked rather well, is to save them steps, save them clicks. So rather than having to go and look up a customer and get the necessary documents that are available currently on the websites for the carriers, to have that automatically be transferred into their system and have them follow up if necessary. If not, that's certainly fine too. But to get that important information that helps them to run that agency more efficiently, more smoothly. Things like underwriting that may still be needed, or payments, as I mentioned, that were not yet received or that are late. Or in some cases, even claim information where that initial indication, even before a possible claim download would come through, just a little trigger to say, hey, look, this is something to pay attention to. And in our system, that can get routed to the CSR that's associated with a particular policy, or if there are some instances in the types of activity note download that doesn't really apply directly to a policy, we have set it up so there's a default CSR in the agency who can then route it to whomever they think it should be. And what we have found is that that really does work very smoothly and really does help keep that workflow being very efficient with the NASA Eclipse system.
Wow, great answer. Thank you very much for that, Dennis. I am going to turn next to you, Josh, and ask you the same question. Can you talk to us a little bit about Applied handles the messages and what type of workflow improvements Applied agents can achieve by accepting activity notes?
Certainly. Like NASA, we will route automatically to the client or policy level. If we can identify that matching policy and client, we'll route it automatically. If not, then it will go to our suspense area where it can be assigned out from there, including the company level. And the nice thing about this is the way that we've kind of configured the system is that it enables users to initiate their workflows from those activity notes. So they can either be one-offs, just a record that the attachment was received and it went to the policy level and nothing more needs to be done, or it can really initiate through an activity a full workflow that a CSR or a producer, an account manager would then go ahead and track and process. For instance, if you had those pending cancellation notifications, that sort of activity note really should start a workflow. It shouldn't just be a one-off. You want to get that information to the insured, make sure the bill is paid, make sure the business is retained, and that the agent doesn't need to shop that business around, and that the client as well has a better overall experience. And again, you know, to Dennis's point, it definitely reduces the manual effort because the documents are already in their system. They don't have to go out to multiple carrier websites to pull these items in. It makes the agent and carrier experience a lot smoother. It really makes the agents a lot happier because they're spending less time on manual, redundant office work. And by default, they're also getting a little better E&O coverage because it doesn't matter if someone missed pulling in the deck page or if the download wasn't processed because you've automatically pulled in through the Ivans network the deck page attachment. So that's a great thing. And something that kind of stems from that then is if you imagine later getting an audit, if you've got this complete record of all the documents that the carrier sent you automatically, when it comes time to either do that internal audit or that carrier audit, you've got that entire trail of information on that client and policy so that audit just goes a lot smoother. And then overall, because you're saving time and effort, you know, the nice thing is that the CSRs and the account managers and others are spending more time on client servicing, account management, round out. They've got a quick view of deck pages and things to go to, and they're spending more time providing that high degree of service that insureds inspect.
Yeah, and thank you. And if I want to ask a follow-up question really quick. You had mentioned pending cancellation, and Dennis did as well, I believe, and mentioned that it could trigger a workflow. Can you give an example of what might happen if a pending cancellation activity note transaction came in?
Certainly. So in our TAM and EPIC systems, that would create an activity that would then be routed to the appropriate client and policy. From that, we would determine who the employee is within the agency that's servicing that account or that policy. We'd create an activity for them that they would see first thing in the morning on their home base screen, and the activity itself would then lead them to what the next steps are. Do they need to create a form letter? Are they going to email the attachment to the insured with an explanation of how to pay the bill, maybe a link to the carrier's website if it's a direct bill policy or other options available to them? And then the CSR, the account manager, who's ever responding, can then follow up to ensure that the insured's made the payment, that the policy will remain in force, and again, retain that business.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Nellie, I know that Vertafore agents really love their attachments, and deck pages being one of them. Can you talk about Vertafore, the types of workflow improvements that Vertafore agents are able to achieve with activity notes?
Of course, and very similar again to Josh and Dennis. It's very much the same thing. It saves time for our agents having to go and retrieve the things, retrieve the documents, retrieve the information, the claim status, the pending cancellation information. So instead of having to go and retrieve it themselves, it's actually sitting in a mailbox for them, just like all of their other things. So it's a push model instead of a pull, which is obviously tremendous time savings. There's the same E&O things that Josh was talking about. I believe Dennis was as well. In terms of you got it from the carrier, and you have the document. You can attach it wherever you want to. Now we have agents obviously that have their own document management systems. They can attach it into their agency management systems. They can attach it into WorkSmart, which will start up a new workflow for them. There's a lot of different things that our agents are doing with these. They can forward these to the insured themselves. So again, it's saving time, more accuracy. I mean, it's everything that all of download and anything essentially generating from a carrier to an agent can help you with. Saves them, postage, storage, paper-free office. I mean, there's so many things that this is just so beneficial for.
I have to say thank you also, Nellie, but I love that even in the conversations that we have about these transactions, even the conversations are consistent. So I think that this is going to be a really valuable transaction going forward. And that being said, I just want to take a quick break and reiterate that if you have any questions, anyone on this call has any questions in general or for anyone specific on the call, please use that chat feature to submit them. We do have a queue of questions that have already begun, so don't be shy. Ask anything that you'd like. That being said, I'll get back to our questions for our panel. And Josh, I'm going to highlight you this time and start with Applied. What are Applied's current offerings, and what are you looking to add in the future? And I realize some of this may repeat some of the things that you said, but what's available today?
Certainly, and I don't mind being a little repetitious here because I hope everyone's noticing the degree of consistency that you're hearing from everyone. With Jeff at ACT and others, we identified as an industry a best practices workflow, and we've implemented that. So this is a very powerful tool for agents due to the consistency in the industry. We currently support the full Accord Cycle Business Purpose code list. There's roughly 50 or so. I think there might be 57 total codes in that list. Now that sounds a bit daunting, but let me say that we've created a best practices implementation guide, a sort of a business case, if you will, that kind of groups the various transactions that should be implemented. We will support all of them, but some of them, obviously, as we've stated, those related to cancellations, claims and losses, and policy deck pages are the most beneficial to an agent, the most commonly used, and so that business case document kind of details and explains what codes to implement to support those workflows. We support the automatic routing and attaching of the messages and the creation of differentiated workflows based upon the activity codes received. That includes both the user workflow as well as where the attachment goes to. So there are folder structures associated with that. If the agencies of a size that they use specific folder structures to store their attachments, then those items can be routed accordingly, such as deck pages, insured notifications, etc. The future, which is where I get really excited about this, about the activity note messages, I think that I can see a lot of potential for the commercial lines. to really improve the communications when reserving markets, determining appetite, submitting the business, getting underwriting questions back. I think the activity note message itself just inherently could really streamline that whole process. Provide for more timely responses and requests between carriers and agents, and I really hope that's something that we as an industry can expand into. I also would like to see us provide for some expanded matching and routing logic so that things could automatically go to a carrier detail or to an agency account or maybe other types of accounts beyond just policies and clients, so that more items, more documents are being automatically routed where it makes sense within an agency workflow.
Thanks, Josh. It sounds like the future is bright.
It is.
Nellie, let's go to you. Vertafore agent, what are your current offerings and what are you looking to add in the future?
Sure. Again, I agree with Josh. It's very, very exciting, and this is probably one of the most exciting download messages that that we've had in a long time. So what we offer right now is across all of our agency management system platforms. So every one of them, because all of them can access Transact Now. So any Vertafore agent can get activity notes. It's basically just a simple setup. It's very, very easy. We support anything that a carrier can send that goes along with the Accord XML standard. So it's, everything is there. As far as carrier implementations, we have specs that we can offer carriers. We've got a certification tool that carriers can use to certify against the XML standard as well. And let me think. Well, for improvements in the future, one of the things that is near and dear to my heart, actually, and Kylene's heart, who's on the phone as well, Kylene from Vertafore, probably some of you know, most of you know, is actually integrating this better into our WorkSmart product and into our agency management system. So similar to what Josh and I believe Dennis were saying, the routing, the workflow processes, all of that is something I can't wait to see and that we hope for in the future.
Awesome. It is exciting to be talking about this today. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from everybody for this transaction. And Dennis, as far as NASA goes, what are your current offerings and what do you see as what are you looking to add in the future?
We are in a similar position, I think, from both what Nellie and Josh have already said. We're looking to support all of the various types. We do support what carriers are able to send. We're just at a point where we're finding that we're anxious to begin to certify any carriers, any companies that are beginning to look at this. I know that the interest is rising, and that probably for the future is the single greatest thing to really look to see how this is going to just, I think, begin to really take off. You get to a certain point of critical mass, and we're going to just see this as one of the really fantastic ways to transmit information from carrier to agency. And we're ready to certify any carrier who's kind of got this on the back of their mind or in the front of their project queue to get this going. We would love to be able to work with them and make it a possibility for agencies to get this from whomever they write with.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. And I want to go back to Jeff, to you right at this moment, and ask you the next question. And kind of along the lines of what Nellie and Josh and Dennis have been saying, but as the future for activity notes.
Yeah, and I'd like to pick up on Josh's point. I think there is great potential that activity notes will be used as we start to automate more of the commercial lines, mid-commercial, particularly the underwriter conversations going back and forth. And we talked a lot about one of the big efficiencies of activity notes is the the documents and information gets pushed to the agent rather than the agent having to go up to the website, to the carrier websites and pulling it down, which I hear from agents all the time is really a frustration. You know, they want it pushed to them. They don't want to have to go up and get it. But again, in mid-commercial, I think we're going to see a lot of use of this. In fact, we've had a mid-commercial work group a couple years back, you know, designed a whole workflow for the future for mid-commercial that takes advantage of existing technology, you know, using real-time quote requests and responses in order to get data up to the carrier, but then using activity notes for all that ongoing conversation that happens in mid-commercial. And that's kind of a key point I want to bring up looking to the future. Some of the activity notes in the future are going to have to be more immediate in nature. So like the activity notes generally are going to be downloaded in the evening, and that works fine for the agent. But there are some areas, particularly in underwriting conversations, underwriting memos, where there's a need for more immediate activity notes getting to the agent. And so I think looking to the future, both agents and carriers are going to have to develop the capability to be able to get these activity notes into the queue, into the Ivan's mailboxes multiple times a day, and then the agent would pick them up multiple times a day, so you can handle these kind of immediate areas. And in that, we talked earlier about the carrier communications chart and so forth, you know, for electronic communications, and that work group tried to identify some of the activity notes which we thought were immediate in nature, and we identified them as such. And they would be things like underwriting memos, such as confirmation that a submission's been received and the market's been reserved, or if that underwriter needs additional information in order to reserve a market, you know, the agent's not going to want to wait to get that overnight. They're going to want that immediately so that they can make sure that they're the ones that do reserve that market. When there's an endorsement question to be answered, the underwriter comes back to the agent with an activity note saying there's an endorsement question to be answered. The agent's going to want to do that immediately so that can get done. And then also carrier confirmation of agent requests for policy changes. So again, that's getting kind of specific, but there are a number of the activity notes in the future that I think are going to have to be more immediate. So I think the industry is going to have to come up with a way to have more frequent putting that stuff in the mailboxes and the agents retrieving it multiple times a day. And then I'd also like to make a point. We keep talking about using activity notes to send deck pages to the agents. And I just want to point out that our policy delivery work group, you know, one of the issues was now that we're talking about electronic policies delivered to the agent, what that work group at least felt was that the agent wants to receive the entire insured policy for new business and renewals, not just the deck pages. So that's just something I just want to throw into your thinking, because that was an issue that we spent quite a bit of time on, and there was a feeling that now that we're sending these things electronically, we don't have to have it insured in an agent's copy. The agents want the insured copy, and if there's any agent-specific documents like commissions and things like that, that would be sent separately. So I just want to put that, you know, since we have a lot of folks on the call, that let's think differently about how we can use activity notes to send the whole policy, not just deck pages.
Thanks, Jeff. I know that we're all really excited to see this transaction develop. And that being said, I want to give everybody a minute just to add any final thoughts that they'd like to share with the audience. We've had a lot of questions come in, so let's take just a minute. Everybody give your final. We'll start with the Q&A for the audience. Nellie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Just some final thoughts for the agents and the carriers. I mean, obviously for carriers, we too are more than happy to work with you to you know, get certified, and again, the download certification tool. For agents, because we have had a few agents getting confused as to how to get information on this, if they just log into My Vertafore and they search on Transact Now activity notes, you'll see a whole slew of information out there. And also, again, for the agents, contact your carriers and say, I mean, if this is something that you want, and vice versa, tell us if there are other things that you would like in addition to what is already supported.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dennis, how about you? What are your final thoughts before we go to questions?
Well, I will echo Nellie's comments exactly. I had jotted down in my notes that it really is, it's a great opportunity, and for those agents who are on the webinar, begin to think about what kind of possibilities you'd like and talk to the carriers that you write with. Encourage them if they're not already doing it. If they are, get a hold of your management system vendor, their support team, and get it enacted, get it started. And I think it will not be unlike what I've been doing this long enough that I've seen the rise from personal lines download to all of the other types of downloads that we've done, and I think we're just at the point where, although I know there are agencies who are already doing this, it's really set to take off, and we're going to see just a tremendous growth in this over the next months and years.
Thank you. Josh, let's turn it over to you. Final thoughts?
Sure. For our agents in attendance, we do have implementation guides, adoption guides, information to help file. Probably the best place to start if you're unfamiliar is with interface support. Happy to help you through that process. For the carriers, contact Interface Certifications, and they can assist you with certification, implementation, carrier specs, that sort of thing. But I kind of want to touch just for a moment on something, that both Nellie and Jeff alluded to. This is just the beginning. We can get to paper-free. We can improve the security. Imagine routing underwriting messages to the responsible employee at both the carrier and the agent side without needing to send an email, without needing to have a specific person's email, and ensuring it still gets to where it belongs. For the carriers in this call and for the agents, this is the beginning. What we offer now is just the beginning. This functionality is going to grow just like Policy Download has, and it's only going to get better from here. So the earlier you get started, the earlier you adopt, the greater you're going to realize efficiency gains as well as, let's face it, financial gain as well.
Thank you. Jeff, I'm going to end it with you before we go to questions. What are your final thoughts?
Well, again, I just, ACT does a lot of thinking about how can we make the agent-carrier workflows more efficient in the future. And as we've talked about today in these various work groups and reports we've mentioned, it's amazing how much Activity Notes comes up as a great vehicle to enhance the process. And I would second Josh's thoughts that we're just at the beginning of this. And I think agents and carriers working together in their councils and so forth can really be helpful in designing new ways to do this. For example, Josh, you were mentioning new ways to connect beyond just the agent, the client and the policy. Because one of the things that Policy Delivery Work Group came up with was to also indicate, have a way in the standard where when it comes through, it not only goes to the agency management system, but it also goes to your consumer portal that the agent might have, the policy document, if it's an appropriate one to go to that place. So again, that's a future thing, and that's a possibility, but we all need to be thinking about, getting the basics implemented that we've been talking about today, but then, thinking about how this can be used to evolve. And again, I think the agent and carrier interaction can be vital in coming up with new ways to use these things effectively.
Great. Once again, thank you all for sharing your insight, experience, all this information with us, and we very much appreciate it. What I'd like to do now is one last time say if you do have a question, anybody on the call today, use the chat feature, submit it. We have a lot of questions, so we're going to try to get to all of them. And if we do not get to your question, we will make sure that we get a response to you after the call. I also wanted to point out very quickly that this is being recorded, So if you have to drop off, we will be making that recording available within about a week on our website and distributed to everyone that registered. So let's get into our first question. A few of these we are similar, so let's go ahead and say one of the questions that came in was, when will this take effect? And activity note download is something that's available today. It's something that's been available, and it is a matter for our agents to really request this of their carriers. Reach out to your carriers, find out what they've made available, and if they haven't, encourage them to begin to send those transactions as a download. And as we've discussed throughout this call, the theme has really been consistency and what are the implementation priorities. Deck pages being one of the biggest things that are extremely valuable and definitely a priority on that list. Pending cancellations has been mentioned a few times on this call as well. So for you carriers out there that are wondering, how do I go about what to implement first, those are definitely things that should be at the top of your list. And Jeff, would you tell us, a couple questions have come in, what is the exact website for ACT? And again, mention about the document that's available.
Right, so it's the, you just have to go to iiaba.net/ACT, and that's the website. Or you can go to independentagent.com/ACT if that's easier to remember. And either one will take you to the ACT site. And the documents, you'll see kind of like some of the most popular articles are right down the center of the website. And then you can, there's a section on being efficient. And then you'll find the agency preferences for carrier electronic communications report. That's the one on that has a chart of all the different carrier communications and where that work group felt activity notes could be used. And the second document that I'd recommend is the one from the Policy Delivery Work Group, which is called Best Practices Recommendations for Delivery of Insurance Policies to Agents and Insurers. And both of those are up on that ACT site.
Thank you. Another question that came in was asking about if there was somewhere to find which carriers offer these downloads via IVANS, and they are sent via the IVANS ICE mailbox, the Insurance Communication Exchange. There is a list of carriers and their offerings on ivansinsurance.com, and it's available under the Resource tab. Another question that came in is, what do we need to get these activity downloads, and when will these updates be available? You know, that is a question that if you are an agent, you should be requesting them from your carrier for sure. And each of your vendor support areas should be able to help you with implementation. And Josh, why don't I ask you that? How would an agent go about setting up the activity note translation? Who would they contact?
It's our interface support team, which is option 2. So when you call the support line, or if you use some of the chat features, you can be connected with the interface support team. They will put you in contact with both the resource documentation that we have for the carrier lists, as well as implementation guides and explanations, and even assist walking an agent through the configuration to ensure that it fits within their workflows.
Thank you. Nellie, how about Vertafore agents? How would they go about getting the transactions set up in their systems? How does it become available for them?
Sure. It's basically, there's a few different ways, similar to, I'm sure, the other vendor management systems. But you can call into our support line. You can always log into My Vertafore and get the information there. Another thing I actually wanted to say, to add to what you were saying before, as far as how do you find out which carriers are supported, we have our own certification list, and I know that the other management system vendors do as well. That it's on our website at vertafore.com in our resource library, and there's the carrier partner list where you can find out who's on Transact Now, who's on activity notes, who's on download. That same information is also on My Vertafore. So basically, contact us and we'll help you get started.
Great. And I want to make sure that, Dennis, we find out, what about NASA agents? Who do they contact? How do they get it set up?
Well, it's also very easy for the NASA agents. Call support the regular support number. Our website, nasasoft.com, they just can log in there, and we have a list of companies that are currently certified for download, activity notes download, or any of the other types as well, and we support all of the types that are available. And so really all they need to do is contact their carriers. If the carrier is sending it, get them to turn it on and begin sending it through Transfer Manager. And if the only prerequisite for our software is they just need to make sure they're up to date. And then they will be able to pull those in. It's a very easy process for them to get started and should not take them any time at all to begin doing that.
Thank you, and I'm glad that you brought up to make sure that you contact your carrier, because agents definitely need to contact and work with their carriers as the first step, really. So thank you for bringing that up. Another question that's come in.
Can I mention one thing?
Sure, Jeff, go ahead.
You also have that great IVANS document on activity notes. A lot of people are asking for resources and more information. And you'll probably talk about how people can access that, because I found that really helpful, particularly in explaining the proper codes to be used, so we have consistency among the carriers in the codes. And there's one other resource on the ACT site that I just wanted to mention that the industry developed through the real-time campaign a couple years back, and it's called the Agency Real-Time Best Practices, Workflows, and Implementation Strategies for Carriers and Vendors. And it has a section on activity notes as well in there.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually, you're right. This is probably a good time to bring up the use case document. What we will do is we will send a link to that document out, and if you would like it any sooner, anybody on this call, please reach out to your IVANS representative or myself, and we can certainly make sure that you receive a copy of that document. There's a lot of very useful information in it, and will help you to be as organized as possible when you're implementing the activity notes download. Another question that came in was about how do we receive activity note download? Where do we receive it? It is something that is only available via the IVANS mailbox. So the activity note download goes to an agent's mailbox and is not available outside of the IVANS network. If you don't have an IVANS mailbox, you can ask your carrier to set up a mailbox for you, register you in the system, and activate you for their particular download. If you have any questions whatsoever about that, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to help you. Jim Bainey is IVANS Agency Relations Manager, and it's jim.bany@ivansinsurance.com. He's also available to help you if you would like to ask any specific questions. Another question that came in, let's see. Josh, this one is to you, and I think you've answered this already, but let's just reiterate it because I think it's important. But the question is to apply, and Nellie or Dennis, if you'd like to answer this too, please feel free. Where can you find what is required to set up and what is optional in setup? I know you've answered this, but if you could just please reiterate it.
Certainly, certainly. There is information in the product help files. In addition, we have created product-specific guides that walk someone through what to expect from activity notes, how to configure it, what the workflows look like in their system, and then, but really, I always recommend that they give our support techs a call just to ensure that someone is walking them through that. And unless they're a power user, it's best to get some assistance from the support team just to ensure that they're properly configured, they get the data they want in the way they want, and properly update their system. So that's probably the best place to start, and that's probably true for all of us. I'll leave that up to Nellie and Dennis.
Yeah, Nellie, why don't you go ahead next, and then we'll let Dennis answer the same question.
Yeah, it's definitely true for all of us. The support line, the setup, it's very, very easy. Once it's set up, all you have to do as an agent is contact the other carriers that you represent that are certified for sending the download to us, and it just automatically comes into the mailbox. We actually can pick up as often as the carrier wants to send the information. The information does go over the IVANS network, but anything that's there, we automatically notify our agents of. So same thing, what Josh said.
Dennis, I'm assuming it's pretty similar.
Yeah, it really is. We've got the same need for just some really minor setup. We need to make sure that receive class is in Transfer Manager, but otherwise it's really easy. If they're already downloading, it's not at all unlike what they're receiving and getting and processing. And then there's just about 2 setup items that they need to do in our system, and our documentation includes references to that, and the support team is ready and willing to take their calls to help them with that as well.
Thank you. One of the other questions that came in was that somebody believed that activity notes are available to be retrieved multiple times a day now. Can you please confirm? And this, Jeff kind of touched on what you saw as future opportunities. If you'd like to expand on it, please feel free. But as of now, and IVANS can help you with any carrier with the translation and getting it through to an agency's mailbox. But as of now, typically it's happening as a normal download once a day. But a carrier can set up downloads to go multiple times a day. It just, at this point, it's generally one time a day. Jeff, do you want to expand upon that, seeing that as part of the future?
Yeah, well, again, I think the vendor reps can talk about whether their systems can pick it up multiple times a day if the carrier is able to deliver it. I was just trying to make the point that we're going to need that capability in the future if Activity Notes is going to reach its full potential, particularly when we talk about underwriting type communications.
Right. I think it's important to reiterate that getting up and running and being consistent and having a roadmap with priorities, implementation priorities, is really important to focus on initially, and then expanding that offering to either be multiple times a day or include other types of information is really a great future outlook. Today, based on use cases, based on what agents really would like to see, I do believe that we can categorize those into the 4 categories that we identified earlier in this presentation.
If I can just jump in for a second, I'll just say that
sure,
yeah, the applied products do support the ability for an agent to go and pick up activity notes only files throughout the day. So they can pick up just that and leave the policy download and claims download and DBCD for later. So the products enable that functionality, and we offer that just as let's get the ball rolling. To your point, most of the carriers are, and I probably just out of habit, are still offering that download once a day as sort of a nightly download. So some of the groundwork is laid for future functionality, but a lot of carrier implementations are currently just happening overnight.
And I would add that in that carrier communications report, most of the areas where we recommended using activity notes, the agents were fine with an overnight download. It's just when you start to get into some of the underwriting things that are more urgent, that's where in the future, I think it's going to be nice to have multiple pickups during the day.
Thank you. One of the questions that came in, and I'll quickly answer this one, is this available to just Vertafore management systems, or can other management systems integrate with IVANS for the note downloads? As of today, any agents that are using an applied system, a NASA system, or a Vertafore system are able to accept activity notes transactions via download, and it's done via the IVANS mailbox environment. However, there are a number of other agency management systems vendors that are in development or putting a plan in place to develop support for activity notes. Today, currently, Vertafore, NASA, and applied agents are up and running. Let's see. Another question that came through is, would you type in the website you said? Okay, I'm not sure which website somebody was referring to, but there are a number of places that you can go for documents and information. IIABA.net, correct me, Jeff, if I was wrong with that, but that you can find a number of different informational documents, ivansinsurance.com, or your vendor websites, Applied's website, Vertafore website, NASA's website. GetRealtime.org has a lot of useful information. So please check to those to see what reference materials are available, and feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'd be more than happy to direct you or provide you with whatever you may need or talk you through something.
So again, on the ACT site, let me just make the point, it's iiaba.net, and then you have to do /ACT to get to the ACT information.
Okay, thank you. How about, Jeff, let me throw this question over to you and make sure I don't talk too much. Is FNOL part of activity notes?
Well, it's interesting. In the communications work group, they specifically wanted to use claims download for that. I'm talking about now where it goes directly to the carrier, and then the claim then gets reported to the agent. And also, our group had come up with email as well as phone call if it's a significant claim. But you know, our feeling was claims download was the best way to handle claims information into the agency system, rather than activity notes. However, if you know, this is another area where agents and carriers need to talk, and it may very well be that to get an immediate notification of a claim, it may be that you know, activity note starts to be used there. That's another example of, in the future, why it's going to be important to pick up activity notes multiple times a day. But again, right now, as far as where that carrier communications work group came up, they recommended using claims download as a primary way to get the information to the agent, and then if it was significant, they recommended a phone call or email as a way to handle it.
Thanks, Jeff. You know, I'm so happy that we're getting so many questions in, and I know that we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So I want you all to know on the call that we are going to make sure that everyone gets a response if you've asked a question, and that we will disseminate both the presentation slides. There's only a few of them, but we'll make those available, as well as the use case document and other resources, web resource links to everybody that registered for today's session. I do want to end on one of the questions that somebody's entered that says, of the carriers that send documents through email, such as policies, endorsement, pending cancellation, will they continue to do this if they're downloading docs? We definitely do not want to get things duplicated. Josh, why don't you share your thoughts on that? Do you think that they'll continue to do it or will it be replaced by docs?
That's a good question. I would certainly hope that it would be replaced by docs, but I just want to be clear, like there's different uses to different functionality. You know, you can certainly use claims download and activity notes download both to meet some claims needs, as well as, you know, getting the deck page, whether it's the full view or the insured view for a new business transaction. The carrier should be sending both the policy download transaction, the AL3, because that meets a very specific need of having the data in the agent's system. But then the activity notes download also fulfills a very specific need in providing supporting documentation that goes along with that. So, you know, I would say a lot of these different features can exist together, and they really should exist together.
Could I just add that in our work groups, in the case where, let's say, the agent elects the activity notes as a way to get pending cancellations, let's say, then the hope would be that the carrier would not send the email of the same information in that case. You know, in other words, it would depend on the situation. I think Josh is exactly right, you know, in terms of policy download versus other types of information attachments getting. But I do think if it's the same exact information, like a policy, electronic policy, once the agent elects the activity notes, hopefully the carrier will turn it off sending it by email.
Great, thank you. And on that note, I want to thank my panel so much for sharing your insights and being here with us today. And I want to thank everyone on the call that was able to join us. This was a great session. Unfortunately, we were not able to address all the questions in the time that we have permitted today, but we will make sure that all the questions are addressed separate from the call and that everyone gets answers to them. Again, thank you very much, and you should see a link to the recorded presentation within about a week. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me or to anyone else at Ivans or on this call today. Thank you.